Hi, and welcome back for some more chapters of this great novel, Natalie Babbitt's Tuck Everlasting. What if you could live forever? And that's what is going on in this story. Winnie is faced with, what if I could live forever? Do I believe the Tucks? The end of the last chapter, Jesse, who's the youngest Tuck, he's only 17 years old, came to visit Winnie while she was trying to sleep on their lumpy couch in their little house and says, "You think on it, Winnie Foster," Jessie whispered earnestly. "Think on it some and see if it don't sound good. Anyway, I'll see you in the morning, all right?" All right. What he's asking her to think on is, what if when she's 17, she drank from the bubbling spring and had life immortal, and they could live happily ever after together? Chapter 15. In Tree Gap, the same moonlight silvered the roof of the Touch-Me-Not cottage, but inside the lamps were burning. "That's right," said the man in the yellow suit. "I know where she is." He sat back in his chair in the Foster's spotless parlor, crossing his long, thin legs, and the suspended foot began a rhythmic jiggling. He hung his hat on his knee and smiled, his eyes nearly closed. "I followed them, you see. She's with them now. As soon as I saw they'd arrived at their destination, I turned around and came directly back. I thought you'd be staying up. You've been looking for her all day, of course. It must be quite a worry." He lifted a hand then, ignoring their exclamations, and began to smooth the thin hairs of his beard. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've come a long way looking for a wood exactly like the one you've got next door here. It would mean a great deal to me to own it. And how pleasant to have neighbors like yourselves. Now understand, I wouldn't cut down many of the trees. No, I'm no barbarian. You can see that. No, just a few. You wouldn't find it different at all, really." He gestured with his long white fingers and smiled, his face crinkling pleasantly. "We'd be good friends, I think. Why, the little girl and I, we're friends already. It would be a great relief to see her safely home again, wouldn't it?" He clicked his tongue and frowned. "Dreadful thing, kidnapping. Isn't it fortunate that I was witness? Why, without me, you might never have heard a word. They're rough country people, the ones that took her. There's just no telling what illiterates like that might do. Yeah." He sighed, lifting his eyebrows and smiling again. "It looks as if I'm the only person in the whole world who knows where to find her." And then the man in the yellow suit sat forward. His long face took on a hard expression. "Now, I don't have to spell things out for people like yourselves. Some types one comes across can't seem to cut their way through any problem, and that does make things difficult. But you, I don't have to explain the situation to you. I've got what you want, and you've got what I want. Of course, you might find that child without me, but you might not find her in time. So I want the wood, and you want the child. It's a trade, a simple, clear-cut trade." He looked around at the three shocked faces, and as if he were seeing nothing there but calm agreement, he smiled delightedly and rubbed his hands together. "Done and done," he said. "I knew right away. I said to myself, now here's a group of intelligent, reasonable people. I'm seldom wrong as a judge of character. Very seldom disappointed. So, all that remains is to write it up on paper, giving me the wood to sign it. It's best. Don't you agree, to keep things legal and tidy? The rest is easy. Nothing to do to it. You go to your local constable, and he and I ride out and bring back the child and the criminals." "No, oh no, Mr. Foster, I understand your concern. You mustn't come along. We'll do this business my way. There now, your terrible ordeal is as good as over, isn't it? I'm so thankful I was here to help you out." What is the man in the yellow suit doing? This is extortion. Why does he want the wood? I bet you know why he wants the wood. This is exactly what the Tucks were afraid of. Someone who would come in and politicize the spring for profit because most people might think, oh, live forever? That's awesome. Let me turn the page. The constable was fat. By the way, constable is kind of like a sheriff or a police officer. And he was sleepy. He wheezed when he spoke. And he spoke quite a bit as they started off, he and the man in the yellow suit. First, they roused me on a bed in the middle of the night after I've been out since sunup looking for that child. And now I suppose you're going to try to run me all the way? He said sourly. I got to tell you, this horse of mine is none too strong. I don't have to hurry her as a rule, so most of the time it doesn't matter. Seems to me we could have waited till dawn anyway. The man in the yellow suit was as courteous as always. The Fosters have been waiting since yesterday morning, he pointed out. Naturally, they're very upset. The sooner we get there, the sooner that child will be with them again. How come you're so deep in it? Asked the constable suspiciously. Maybe you're in cahoots with the kidnappers. How do I know? You should have reported it right off when you saw her get snatched. The man in the yellow suit sighed. But of course I had to find out where they were taking her, he explained patiently. I came right back after that. And the Fosters are friends of mine. They sold me their wood. The constable's eyes went round. I'll be, he said. What do you know about that? I didn't suppose they'd ever do a thing like that, friend or no friend. They're the first family around here, you know. Proud as peacocks, all of them. Family proud and land proud, too. But they sold off, did they? Well, well. And he whistled in amazement. Did they sell off? Or did he bribe them? They thumped along in silence for a while, out around the wood and across the starlit meadow. Then the constable yawned deeply and said, You ready to tell me how long this is going to take? How far we got to go? 20 miles north, said the man in the yellow suit. The constable groaned. 20 miles? He shifted the shotgun that rested across his saddle and groaned again. Clear up in the foothills? That's a fair way, all right. There was no reply to this. The constable ran his fingers down the gleaming barrel of the shotgun. Then he shrugged and slumped a little in the saddle. Might as well relax, he wheezed, suddenly companionable. We'll be riding 3 or 4 hours. Still, there was no reply. Yes, sir, said the constable, trying again. It's something new for these parts, kidnapping. Never had a case like this before that I know of, and I've been in charge going on 15 years. He waited. You don't say so, his companion said at last. Yep, that's a fact, said the constable with evident relief. Maybe now there would be some conversation. Yep, 15 years. Seen a lot of trouble in 15 years, but nothing quite like this. Of course, there's a first time for everything, as they say. We got a brand new jailhouse. Did you notice? Listen, it's a dandy. Give those nice folks nice, clean accommodations, he chuckled. Of course, they won't be in there for long. Circuit judge will be coming through next week. He'll send him over to Charlieville, most likely to the county jail. That's what they do for your serious crimes. Of course, we got a gallows of our own if we ever need it. Keeps down trouble, I think, just having it there. Ain't ever used it yet. That's because they take care of the serious stuff over to Charlieville, like I say. The constable paused to light a cigar and went on cheerfully. What you got planned for that piece of forest land? Going to clear her? Put up a house or a store, maybe? No, said the man in the yellow suit. The constable waited for more, but there was no more. His sour mood returned. He frowned and shook the ashes from his cigar. Say, he said, you're kind of a close-lipped feller, ain't you? The man in the yellow suit narrowed his eyes. His mouth, above the thin gray beard, twitched with annoyance. Look here, he said tightly. Would you mind if I rode on ahead? I'm worried about that child. I'll tell you how to get there, and I'll go on ahead and keep watch. Well, said the constable grudgingly, all right, if you're in such a ding-dang hurry. But don't you do nothing till I get there. Those folks are likely dangerous. I'll try to keep up, but this horse of mine, she's none too strong. Don't see how I could get her to gallop, even if I tried. That's right, said the man in the yellow suit, so I'll go on ahead and wait outside the house until you get there. He explained the route carefully, then dug his heels into the flanks of the old fat horse, cantering off into the darkness, where just a hint of dawn glowed on the edges of the hills far ahead. The constable chewed on the end of his cigar. Humph, he said to his horse. Did you get a feelin' or gander at the suit of clothes? Oh, well, it takes all kinds, as they say. As he followed slowly after, yawning, the gap between him and the man ahead lengthened with every mile. Constable seems like an interesting chap, not in too much of a hurry, and the man with the yellow suit wasn't really interested in telling him what he's planning on doing with that tree or the little forest that he's just basically hornswoggled Winnie Foster's parents out of. Chapter 17. For the second morning in a row, Winnie Foster woke early. Outside, in the ring of trees around the pond, the birds were celebrating, giving the new day a brass band's worth of greeting. Winnie freed herself from the twisted quilt and went to a window. Mist lay on the surface of the water, and the light was still pale. It looked unreal, and she felt herself unreal, waking where she had, with her hair wild and her dress all crumpled. She rubbed her eyes. Through the dewy weeds below the window, a toad hopped suddenly into view, and Winnie peered at it eagerly. But no, of course, it wasn't the same toad. And remembering that other toad, her toad, she thought now, almost fondly, it seemed to her that she had been away from home for weeks. Then she heard a step on the loft stairs and thought, Jessie! At once her cheeks flamed. But it was Miles. He came into the parlor, and when he saw she was up, he smiled and whispered, Good, you're awake. Come on, you can help me catch some fish for breakfast. This time Winnie was careful not to make a noise when she climbed into the rowboat. She made her way to the seat in the stern, and Miles handed her 2 old cane poles. Watch out for the hooks, he warned, and a jar of bait, pork fat cut into little pieces. A big brown night moth fluttered out from under one of the oar blades, propped beside her on the seat, and wobbled off toward nowhere through the fragrant air. And from the bank, something plopped into the water, a frog. Winnie caught a glimpse of it as it scissored away from shore. It's a great description of how a frog swims. The water was so clear that she could see tiny brown fish near the bottom, flicking this way and that. Miles pushed the rowboat off and sprang in, and soon they were gliding up toward the near end of the pond, where the water came in from the stream. The locks grated as the oars dipped and swung, but Miles was skillful. He rowed without a single splash. The dripping from the blades as they lifted sent rows of overlapping circles spreading silently behind them. It was very peaceful. They'll take me home today, thought Winnie. She was somehow certain of this and began to feel quite cheerful. She had been kidnapped, but nothing bad had happened, and now it was almost over. Now, remembering the visit of the night, she smiled and found that she loved them in a most peculiar way. They were her friends, after all, and hers alone. How'd you sleep? Miles asked her. All right, she said. That's good, I'm glad. Ever been fishing before? Nope, she told him. You'll like it, it's fun. And he smiled at her. The mist was lifting now, and the sun poked up through the trees, and the water sparkled. Miles guided the rowboat near a spot where lily pads lay like upturned ponds on the surface. We'll let her drift some here, he said. There'll be trout down those weeds and stems. Here, give me the poles, and I'll bait the hooks for us. Winnie sat watching him as he worked. His face was like Jessie's, yet not like it. It was thinner, without Jessie's rounded cheeks, and paler, and his hair was almost straight, clipped neatly below the ears. His hands were different, too. The fingers thicker, the skin scrubbed looking, but black at the knuckles and under the nails. Winnie remembered that he worked sometimes as a blacksmith, and indeed his shoulders under his threadbare shirt were broad and muscled. He looked solid, like an oar. Whereas Jessie, well, she decided Jessie was like the water, thin and quick. Miles seemed to sense that she was watching him. He looked up from the bait jar, and his eyes returned. Her gaze were soft. Remember I told you I had 2 children? He asked. Well, one of them was a girl. I took her fishing too. His face clouded then, and he shook his head. Her name was Anna. Lord, how sweet she was, that child. It's queer to think that she'd be close to 80 now, if she's even still alive. And my son, he'd be 82. Winnie looked at his young, strong face, and after a moment she said, Why didn't you take them to the spring and give them some of the special water? Well, of course, we didn't realize about the spring while we were still on the farm, said Miles. Afterwards, I thought about going to find them. I wanted to, heaven knows. But Winnie, how'd it have been if I had? My wife was nearly 40 by then, and the children, well, what was the use? They'd have been near grown themselves. They'd have a pa close to the same age as they was. No, it'd have been so mixed up and peculiar, it just wouldn't have worked. Then Pa, he was dead set against it anyway. The fewer people know about the spring, he says, the fewer there are to tell about it. Here's your pole. Just ease the hook down in the water, and you'll know when you get a bite. Winnie clutched her pole, sitting sideways in the stern, and watched the baited hook sink slowly down. A dragonfly, a brilliant blue jewel, darted up and paused over the lily pads, then swung up and away. From the nearest bank, a bullfrog spoke. There certainly are a lot of frogs around here, Winnie observed. That's so, said Miles. They'll keep coming too, long as the turtles stay away. Snappers now. They'll eat a frog soon as look at him. Winnie thought about the perils to the frogs and sighed. It'd be nice, she said, if nothing ever had to die. Well, now, I don't know, said Miles. If you think on it, you'd come to see there'd be so many creatures, including people. We'd all be squeezed in right up next to each other before long. Winnie squinted at her fishing line and tried to picture a teeming world. She said, yes, I guess you're right. Suddenly the cane pole jerked in her hands and bent into an arch. Its tips dragged down nearly to the water's surface. Winnie held on tight to the handle, her eyes wide. Hey, cried Miles, look there, you got a bite. Fresh trout for breakfast, Winnie. But just as suddenly the pole whipped straight against the line, went slack. Shucks, said Miles, it got away. I'm kind of glad, Winnie admitted, easing a rigid grip on the butt of the pole. You fish, Miles. I'm not sure I want to. And so they drifted a little longer. The sky was blue and hard now. The last of the mist dissolved, and the sun, stepping higher above the trees, was hot on Winnie's back. The first week of August was reasserting itself after a good night's sleep. It would be another searing day. A mosquito appeared and sat down on Winnie's knee. She slapped it absently, thinking about what Miles had said. If all the mosquitoes lived forever, if they kept on having babies, it would be terrible. Tucks were right. It was best if no one knew about the spring, including the mosquitoes. She would keep the secret. She looked at Miles and she asked him, what will you do if you've got so much time? Someday, said Miles, I'll find a way to do something important. Winnie nodded. That was what she wanted. The way I see it, Miles went on, it's no good hiding yourself away like Pa and lots of other people. And it's no good just thinking of your own pleasure either. People got to do something useful if they're going to take up space in the world. I totally agree. We all owe it to the world to do something useful. But what will you do? Winnie persisted. I don't know yet, said Miles. I ain't had no schooling or nothing, and that makes it harder. Then he set his jaw and added, I'll find a way, though. I'll locate something. Winnie nodded. She reached out and ran her fingers across a lily pad that lay on the water beside the boat. It was warm and very dry, like a blotter, but near its center was a single drop of water, round and perfect. She touched the drop and brought her fingertip back wet, but the drop of water, though it rolled a little, remained as round and perfect as before. And then Miles caught a fish. There it flopped in the bottom of the boat. Its jaw worked, its gills fanning rapidly. Winnie drew up her knees and stared at it. It was beautiful and horrible, too, with gleaming rainbow-colored scales and an eye like a marble, beginning to dim even as she watched it. The hook was caught in its upper lip, and suddenly Winnie wanted to weep. Put it back, Miles, she said, her voice dry and harsh. Put it back right away. Miles started to protest, and then looking at her face, he picked up the trout and gently worked the barbed hook free. All right, Winnie, he said. He dropped the fish over the edge of the boat. It flipped its tail and disappeared under the lily pads. Will it be all right? Asked Winnie, feeling foolish and happy both at once. It'll be all right, Miles assured her. And then he said, people gotta be meat eaters sometimes, though. It's the natural way. And that means killing things. I know, said Winnie weakly, but still. Yes, said Miles, I know. So what did we learn here? I think Winnie is starting to believe that things do need to have a beginning and an end, meaning a life cycle. I think she also has a big heart, but I think Miles does too. Tune back in for some more chapters of Tuck Everlasting. Would you want to live forever? Think about it.